she was the kind of girl people forgot about 5 minutes after meeting her. Not because there was anything wrong with her, but because she never made noise. She never raised her hand in class. She never fought for attention. She just existed quietly in the background, while the world moved around her like she was part of the furniture. Her name was May, and she was 12 years old. She lived with her mother in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building where the elevator never worked, and the hallway always smelled like someone was cooking something. Her mother worked 2 jobs, one at a grocery store during the day, another cleaning offices at night. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And for May, that was enough. But there was one thing May had that nobody knew about, a secret she kept hidden like treasure. She could play the piano, not just a little bit. Not just simple songs that kids learn in their first year of lessons. May could play in a way that didn't make sense for someone her age. She could play pieces that took most people years to master. She could hear a song once and figure out how to play it by ear. She could close her eyes and let her fingers move on their own, creating melodies that came from somewhere deep inside her chest. The problem was, nobody had ever heard her play. Not really. 6 years ago, when May was just 6 years old, her mother had saved up enough money to buy her a small electric keyboard from a second-hand store. It wasn't fancy. Some of the keys stuck when you pressed them. The sound was thin and cheap compared to a real piano. But to May, it was everything. She started teaching herself. She watched videos on her mother's old phone, the one with the cracked screen. She found free tutorials online. She practiced for hours every day after school, keeping the volume low so she wouldn't bother the neighbors. Her mother worked so much that she rarely heard May play. And when she did, she would smile tiredly and say it sounded nice before falling asleep on the couch. May never complained. She understood. Her mother was exhausted. Life was hard. Music was her own little world. And maybe it was better that way. Maybe it was safer to keep it hidden. At school, May was invisible. She sat in the back of every classroom. She ate lunch alone at the end of a long table, reading books or staring out the window. Other kids weren't mean to her. They just didn't notice her. Teachers called on her so rarely that sometimes she wondered if they remembered her name. There was a girl in her grade named Christina who played piano. Everyone knew about Christina. She had been taking lessons since she was 4. Her parents paid for the best teachers in the city. She performed at school events, and the teachers always praised her. She was talented, confident, and used to being the center of attention. May watched Christina sometimes during music class. Watched the way she sat up straight at the piano, the way she smiled at the audience before she played, the way everyone clapped for her like she was already a star. May never felt jealous. She just felt far away, like she was watching everything through a window she couldn't open. One afternoon in early spring, May's music teacher made an announcement. His name was Mr. Bradley. And he was an older man with gray hair and glasses that always slid down his nose. He told the class that the school was holding its annual talent show in 3 weeks. Anyone who wanted to participate could sign up. May's heart jumped when she heard the words. A talent show. A chance to play. A real piano. Not her broken keyboard. An audience that might actually listen. But then the fear came rushing in. What if she messed up? What if people laughed? What if they looked at her and wondered why the quiet girl from the back of the room thought she could perform on stage? She pushed the thought away and decided to forget about it. But the thought wouldn't leave her alone. That night, May lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She could hear her mother come home late, moving quietly through the apartment so she wouldn't wake her. She could hear the familiar sounds of the building settling around her. And in her mind, she could hear music. A piece she had been working on for months. Something she had created herself, built note by note from feelings she couldn't put into words. What if she played it? What if just once, she let someone hear what was inside her? The next morning, May did something that surprised even herself. She walked up to Mr. Bradley before class and told him she wanted to sign up for the talent show. He looked at her over his glasses like he was trying to remember who she was. You want to perform? He asked. What's your talent? Piano, she said quietly. He raised his eyebrows. "I didn't know you played piano." "I taught myself," she said. "At home." Mr. Bradley nodded slowly. He didn't look impressed. He didn't look interested. He just looked like a man, adding another name to a list. "All right," he said. "I'll put you down. But since you haven't had formal training, let's keep it simple. Okay? I'll give you a piece to play. Something easy. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed." May wanted to tell him that she wouldn't be overwhelmed. She wanted to tell him about the hours and hours she had spent practicing, about the pieces she could play that would make his jaw drop, but the words got stuck in her throat, the way they always did, so she just nodded. A few days later, Mr. Bradley handed her a single sheet of paper. On it was the music for a nursery rhyme. A song so simple that most kids learned it in their first month of lessons. May stared at the paper. Her chest felt tight. "This should be good for your level," Mr. Bradley said. He wasn't being cruel. He just didn't know. How could he? She had never given him a reason to think she was anything special. She took the paper home and set it on her keyboard. She played through the nursery rhyme once. It took her less than a minute. Her fingers moved automatically, barely thinking about it. Then she sat there in the silence of her small bedroom, looking at her reflection in the dark window. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks until the talent show. She could play the simple song like they expected. She could walk on stage, perform her 30 seconds, and walk off while people politely clapped. She could stay invisible, or she could do something else. She thought about her mother, working 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. She thought about all the nights she had practiced alone, dreaming of a moment like this. She thought about Christina and the way everyone looked at her when she played. May had never asked anyone to see her. She had never demanded attention or fought for a spotlight. But somewhere deep down, in a place she rarely let herself visit, she wanted to be heard. She wanted someone to know that she existed, that she wasn't just the quiet girl in the back of the room. She placed her hands on the keyboard, and she began to practice. Not the nursery rhyme, something else, something real. She didn't know what would happen. She didn't know if she would have the courage to go through with it when the moment came. But for now, in the quiet of her room with the city lights glowing outside her window, she let herself dream. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe she was setting herself up for the biggest embarrassment of her life. But for the first time in a long time, May felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The 3 weeks passed faster than May expected. Every night after school, she practiced. Not the nursery rhyme Mr. Bradley had given her. She learned that in 5 minutes and never touched it again. Instead, she practiced the piece she had been working on for months. The one that lived inside her chest, like a second heartbeat. It was a composition she had created herself. It started soft and gentle, like rain tapping against a window. Then it grew, building layer by layer, picking up speed and emotion until it became something powerful. Something that made her hands shake when she played it. Something that felt like telling her whole life story without saying a single word. She practiced until her fingers ached. She practiced until she could play it with her eyes closed. She practiced until the music felt like breathing. But every night, when she finally stopped and sat in the silence of her bedroom, the doubt crept back in. What was she thinking? She was nobody. Just a quiet girl with a broken keyboard and a dream that was probably too big for someone like her. The other kids in the talent show had real training, real instruments, real confidence. What did she have? She had the music. That was all. She had to believe it would be enough. The night before the talent show, May couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city outside her window. Cars passing. People talking on the street below. The distant rumble of a train. Her mother had come home late again, and May had heard her moving around the kitchen before everything went quiet. She thought about telling her mother what she was planning. But what would she say? That she was going to ignore what the teacher told her and play her own music instead? That she was about to do the scariest thing she had ever done in her life? No. She would keep it to herself. If she failed, at least nobody would know she had tried. The morning of the talent show arrived gray and cloudy. May got dressed in her nicest clothes. A simple blue dress her mother had bought her for a family gathering 2 years ago. It still fit, but barely. She looked at herself in the small mirror hanging on her closet door, and barely recognized the girl staring back at her. She looked scared. She looked small. She looked like someone who was about to make a huge mistake. At school, everything felt different. The hallways buzzed with excitement. Kids talked loudly about the talent show, about who was performing, about who was going to win. May walked through it all like a ghost, unnoticed, just like always. The talent show was scheduled for the afternoon, in the big auditorium where they held assemblies and graduation ceremonies. By lunchtime, May couldn't eat. Her stomach was twisted into knots so tight she thought she might be sick. She sat at her usual spot at the end of the long table and stared at her untouched sandwich. A few tables over, she could see Christina surrounded by her friends. Christina was laughing about something, looking relaxed and confident. Of course she was. She had done this 100 times before. This was nothing to her. May wondered what it felt like to be that sure of yourself. To walk through the world like you belonged there. Like you had every right to take up space. She couldn't imagine it. The afternoon came too quickly. Students who were performing gathered backstage while everyone else filed into the auditorium seats. May stood in the corner of the backstage area, trying to make herself as small as possible. Around her, other kids stretched and warmed up their voices and checked their costumes. Nobody talked to her. Nobody even looked her way. She peeked through a gap in the curtains and felt her heart drop. The auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled. Parents sat in the back rows with cameras ready. Teachers lined the walls. The principal stood near the front, smiling and shaking hands with people. So many eyes, so many people. All of them waiting to watch. May pulled back from the curtain and pressed her hand against her chest. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She could still back out. She could still play the nursery rhyme like Mr. Bradley expected. 30 seconds of simple music, polite applause, and then it would be over. Safe. Forgettable, just like her. The show began. One by one, students walked onto the stage and performed. A group of boys did a dance routine that got everyone clapping along. A girl sang a pop song. Her voice shaky, but sweet. 2 kids performed a comedy skit that made the audience laugh. A boy played the drums so loud the whole room vibrated. Then Christina walked onto the stage. She wore a beautiful white dress that seemed to glow under the stage lights. She sat down at the grand piano in the center of the stage, adjusted the microphone, and smiled at the audience like she was greeting old friends. "I'll be playing a piece by Mozart," she announced. Her voice was clear and confident. May watched from the wings as Christina began to play. The music was beautiful. Perfect, really. Every note was precise. Every phrase shaped exactly right. Christina's hands moved across the keys with the ease of someone who had spent years with the best teachers money could buy. The audience was captivated. Parents nodded approvingly. Teachers whispered to each other about how talented she was. When she finished, the applause was loud and long. Christina stood up and took a graceful bow, beaming. May felt something sink in her chest. How could she follow that? Christina was everything she wasn't. Trained, polished, confident. May was just a girl with a broken keyboard and a homemade song nobody had ever heard. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should have stayed invisible. Next up, the announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. May Lin, playing a piano piece. That was it. Her name. Her turn. Her legs felt like they were filled with concrete. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Someone nudged her from behind. "Hey, that's you. Go." May stumbled forward. She walked through the gap in the curtains and onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She couldn't see the faces in the audience, just shadows and shapes stretching back into the darkness. The grand piano sat in the center of the stage, shiny and black and more beautiful than anything she had ever touched. She walked toward it slowly, her worn-out shoes silent against the wooden floor. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Watching. Waiting. Probably wondering who she was and why they had never seen her before. She sat down on the bench. The piano keys stretched out in front of her, white and black, perfect and whole. Not like her keyboard at home with its sticky keys and cheap sound. This was real. This was what she had dreamed about for years. From the side of the stage, she saw Mr. Bradley watching her. He gave her a small nod, like he was telling her to begin. To play the simple song he had assigned her. To do what she was supposed to do. May looked down at her hands resting on her lap. Her whole life, she had done what she was supposed to do. She had stayed quiet. She had stayed small. She had never asked for anything, or demanded attention, or made anyone uncomfortable. And where had it gotten her? Invisible. Forgotten. Alone. She thought about her mother, working herself to exhaustion every single day just to give her a better life. She thought about all those nights practicing alone in her room, dreaming of a moment exactly like this one. She thought about the music inside her. The music that had been building for 6 years, waiting for a chance to break free. She placed her hands on the keys. The audience waited. Mr. Bradley watched. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. May closed her eyes. She took one long, slow breath, and she made a decision. She wasn't going to play the nursery rhyme. She was going to play her own song. The real one. The one that told the truth about who she was. Whatever happened next, at least she would know she tried. At least she would know that for once in her life, she didn't let fear win. Her fingers found the opening notes, and she began to play. The first notes came out soft. So soft that people in the back rows leaned forward in their seats, straining to hear. It was a gentle beginning, like the first drops of rain before a storm. Simple, quiet, almost like a lullaby. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. A few people in the audience glanced at their programs, probably checking if this was still the same girl who was supposed to play a nursery rhyme. Mr. Bradley stood frozen at the side of the stage, his eyebrows pulled together in confusion. This wasn't the song he had given her. This wasn't even close. But May didn't see any of that. Her eyes were closed. Her fingers moved across the keys like they had done 1,000 times before in her tiny bedroom. The broken keyboard at home had prepared her for this moment, even if nobody believed it could. Every stuck key, every muffled note, every hour of practice in the dark had led her here. The music began to shift. What started as a whisper began to grow. The notes came faster now, layering on top of each other, building something bigger. The melody rose and fell like waves, like breathing, like a heart learning to beat again after being still for too long. People stopped fidgeting in their seats. Phones that had been raised to record were slowly lowered. Conversations in the back of the room went silent. Even the little kids who had been squirming with boredom went still. Something was happening on that stage, something nobody expected. May's hands moved with a kind of grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone her age. Her fingers danced across the black and white keys like they were having a conversation with the piano itself. She didn't look at her hands. She didn't need to. She knew every note by heart. She had lived with this music inside her for so long that playing it felt as natural as breathing. The piece moved into its middle section, and the mood changed. What had been gentle and wondering became something heavier, deeper. There was sadness in the notes now, a loneliness that seemed to hang in the air like fog. It was the kind of music that made your chest ache without knowing why. In the audience, a woman in the third row pressed her hand to her mouth. She didn't know this girl. She had never heard this song before. But somehow, the music was reaching inside her and pulling out feelings she had buried a long time ago. Beside her, her husband sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the small figure at the piano. Mr. Bradley had stopped breathing. He stood at the edge of the stage, his clipboard hanging forgotten at his side. In all his years of teaching music, he had never heard a student play like this. Not Christina, not anyone. This wasn't just talent. This was something else entirely. Something that couldn't be taught. On stage, May was no longer the invisible girl. She was no longer the quiet kid from the back of the classroom who nobody remembered. In this moment, she was the only thing that existed. The only thing that mattered. The music built higher, Faster. May's hands flew across the keys, pulling out sounds that seemed impossible. The notes tumbled over each other like a waterfall, rushing and crashing and filling the auditorium with something alive. It was joyful and heartbreaking at the same time. It was the sound of someone who had kept everything locked inside, finally letting it all pour out. A man sitting near the back of the auditorium felt tears sliding down his cheeks. He wiped them away quickly, embarrassed, but more came. He didn't understand what was happening. He had just come to watch his nephew do a magic trick. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to feel anything at all. In the wings of the stage, Christina stood frozen. She had been gathering her things, ready to leave after her successful performance. But she had stopped when she heard the music. Now she stared at May with an expression that was hard to read. There was surprise there, confusion, and maybe, just maybe, something like respect. The music reached its peak. May's whole body moved with the rhythm, swaying slightly as her fingers commanded the piano. Her face was calm but focused, like she was somewhere far away, somewhere only she could go. The notes rang out loud and clear, echoing off the walls, filling every corner of the room. And then, slowly, the music began to soften. The storm passed. The waves calmed. The melody returned to where it had started, gentle and quiet, like coming home after a long journey. The notes grew slower, more deliberate. Each one hung in the air for just a moment before fading into the next. May played the final phrase. 4 notes, simple and pure, and then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Her hands hovered over the keys. She kept her eyes closed, afraid to open them, afraid to see the faces in the audience, afraid to find out if she had made a terrible mistake. The silence stretched on. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. May's heart pounded in her chest. Why wasn't anyone clapping? Why wasn't anyone making a sound? Had she ruined everything? Had she embarrassed herself in front of the entire school? She opened her eyes slowly and looked out at the audience. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. People were standing. Not just 1 or 2. Dozens of them. Rows of people rising from their seats, their hands coming together. The first clap echoed through the auditorium like a gunshot. Then another, then another. Then the whole room exploded into applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't the kind of applause you give because you're supposed to. It was real. It was loud. It was the sound of people who had just witnessed something they didn't expect, something that had reached inside them and shaken them awake. May sat frozen at the piano, staring out at the standing crowd. She saw teachers wiping their eyes. She saw students she had never spoken to, clapping with huge smiles on their faces. She saw parents turning to each other with shocked expressions, asking who this girl was and where she had come from. At the side of the stage, Mr. Bradley was clapping too. His clipboard lay on the floor where he had dropped it. There were tears on his cheeks, and he didn't bother to hide them. In the back of the auditorium, near the door, a woman had just arrived. She was still wearing her work uniform, a name tag pinned to her chest. She had rushed here straight from her shift, terrified she would miss her daughter's performance. May's mother stood there, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other pressed against her heart. She had caught only the last minute of the performance. But it was enough. It was more than enough. She watched her daughter sitting at that beautiful piano, surrounded by a standing ovation, and she felt something break open inside her chest. All those years of working double shifts, all those nights coming home too tired to stay awake, all those times she had felt like she wasn't doing enough, wasn't giving her daughter the life she deserved. But look at her now. Look at what she had become. On stage, May finally stood up from the piano bench. Her legs were shaking, her hands were trembling. She didn't know what to do with herself. So she just stood there, small and overwhelmed, while the applause kept coming. She found her mother's face in the crowd. Their eyes met across the room, across all those rows of clapping people, and May saw that her mother was crying, but she was also smiling. And for the first time in her life, May understood something important. She had spent so many years believing she was invisible, believing that she didn't matter, believing that the world would never make room for someone like her. But she had been wrong. She had just needed to stop hiding. She had just needed to let the world hear what was inside her. The applause continued, wave after wave, and May stood there, in the middle of it all. Finally seen, finally heard, finally real. This was only the beginning. May walked off the stage in a daze. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The applause followed her as she stepped through the curtains, echoing in her ears like a dream she couldn't quite believe was real. Backstage, everything had changed. Before her performance, nobody had looked at her. She had been just another face in the crowd of performers, invisible as always. But now, as she stepped into the backstage area, heads turned. Kids who had never spoken to her stared with wide eyes. A group of girls whispered to each other, glancing in her direction. A boy who had done a magic trick earlier gave her a thumbs up and mouthed the word, "Wow." May didn't know what to do. She wasn't used to being seen. She wanted to find a corner to hide in, to disappear until her heart stopped racing and her hands stopped shaking. But before she could move, someone stepped in front of her. It was Mr. Bradley. He looked different than he had before the show. The tiredness in his eyes was gone, replaced by something else. Something that looked almost like shame. "May," he said. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I don't even have words for what that was." She stared at him, unsure how to respond. He shook his head slowly, like he was still trying to process what he had witnessed. "I gave you a nursery rhyme, I thought. I assumed you were a beginner. I never even asked what you could do. I just looked at you and made a decision." May stayed silent. She didn't know what he wanted her to say. "I'm sorry," Mr. Bradley said. The words came out heavy, like they cost him something to speak. "I've been teaching for 23 years, and I thought I knew how to spot talent. I thought I could tell who had it and who didn't just by looking at them. But you..." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "You just proved me wrong in front of the entire school." May felt something shift in her chest. She had spent so long being overlooked by people like Mr. Bradley. Teachers who glanced at her and saw nothing special. Adults who made assumptions based on her quiet voice and second-hand clothes. She had started to believe they were right. That maybe she really was as invisible as they made her feel. But she wasn't. She had never been invisible. They just hadn't been paying attention. "It's okay," she said softly. "You didn't know." Mr. Bradley let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. "That's the problem. I should have known. It's my job to know." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "That piece you played, did you write it yourself?" She nodded. His eyes widened. "You composed that? At 12 years old?" "I've been working on it for a while," she said. "It just came out of me. I don't know how to explain it." Mr. Bradley stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. A real smile. Warm and genuine. "Don't ever let anyone put you in a box again," he said. "Not me. Not anyone. You have something special, May. Something rare. Promise me you'll protect it." Before she could respond, a woman appeared beside them. She was tall, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a dark blazer and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that made people pay attention. May had never seen her before. "Excuse me," the woman said, looking directly at May. "I was hoping I could speak with you for a moment." Mr. Bradley straightened up. "Dr. Huang, I didn't know you were attending today." "I wasn't planning to," the woman said. "A friend invited me at the last minute. I almost said no." She turned back to May, and her expression softened. "I'm very glad I didn't." May looked between them, confused. "I'm sorry, who are you?" The woman extended her hand. "My name is Dr. Huang. I'm the director of the Young Musicians program at the City Conservatory. We work with gifted students and help them develop their talents." May shook her hand automatically, but her mind was spinning. "Conservatory? Gifted students?" She had heard of programs like that, but they were for kids like Christina. Kids with expensive lessons and supportive parents, and all the advantages she never had. I've seen a lot of young pianists in my career, Dr. Huang continued. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Most of them are good. Some of them are excellent, but what you did on that stage. She paused, choosing her words carefully. That wasn't just excellent. That was extraordinary. May felt heat rising to her cheeks. She wasn't used to compliments. She didn't know how to hold them. The piece you played, Dr. Huang said. It was original, wasn't it? Yes. And you taught yourself to play? No formal lessons? I watched videos online. And I practiced a lot. Dr. Huang exchanged a look with Mr. Bradley. Something passed between them that May couldn't read. I'd like to talk to your parents, Doctor, Huang said. I think you might be a good fit for our program. We offer full scholarships for students with exceptional talent. Everything would be covered. Lessons, materials, access to our practice rooms and instruments. May's heart stopped. Full scholarship, no cost, real lessons, real pianos. It sounded impossible. It sounded like something that happened to other people. Not to her. My mom is here, May heard herself say. She's in the back of the auditorium, Dr. Huang smiled. Then let's go find her. They walked through the backstage area and out into the auditorium. The talent show was still going on. A group of students was performing a dance number on stage. But May barely noticed. Her eyes scanned the back of the room, searching for her mother. She found her standing near the exit doors. Her mother was still in her work uniform, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, the way she always looked. But when she saw May walking toward her, her face lit up in a way that made everything else disappear. May ran to her. She didn't care that people were watching. She didn't care that she was supposed to be quiet and composed. She ran across the auditorium and threw her arms around her mother, burying her face in her shoulder. Her mother held her tight. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Everything they wanted to say was in the embrace itself. After a long moment, May pulled back. There were tears on her mother's cheeks, but she was smiling so wide, it looked like it might hurt. I only caught the end, her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. But what I heard. May, I had no idea. I had no idea you could play like that. I wanted to surprise you, May whispered. Her mother laughed, wiping her eyes. You definitely surprised me. I think you surprised everyone. Dr. Huang approached them gently, introducing herself to May's mother and explaining who she was. May watched her mother's face as she listened. Confusion at first. Then, disbelief. Then something that looked like hope. A scholarship, her mother repeated. For May? At the conservatory? If she's interested, Dr. Huang said. And if you're comfortable with it. I know this is a lot to take in. But I wanted to reach out before anyone else did. Your daughter has a gift. I'd like to help her develop it. May's mother looked at her. For a long moment, she just stared, like she was seeing her for the first time. Then she reached out and cupped May's face in her hands. You did this, she said softly. All by yourself. All those nights in your room with that old keyboard. I thought you were just playing around. I didn't realize. She couldn't finish the sentence. The tears came again, harder this time. May felt her own eyes burning. I didn't do it by myself, she said. You worked so hard to give me everything. The keyboard. The phone so I could watch lessons. A home where I felt safe enough to dream. You gave me all of that. Thanks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. And we capsed about. Also. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Her mother pulled her close again, holding her like she never wanted to let go. Around them, the talent show continued. Students performed, and audiences clapped. The world kept moving like it always did. But for May and her mother, standing there in the back of that auditorium, everything had changed. A door had opened, and for the first time in their lives, they could see what was waiting on the other side. 1 year later, May stood backstage at the city concert hall, waiting for her name to be called. The building was nothing like her school auditorium. The ceilings soared high above her head. The walls were decorated with golden trim and paintings of famous composers. The seats were covered in red velvet, and there were 3 balconies stacked on top of each other, all of them filled with people. This was the annual showcase for the Young Musicians program, the biggest event of the year. And May was the closing act. She took a deep breath and looked down at her hands. They were steady now. A year ago, they would have been shaking. A year ago, she would have been hiding in a corner, trying to disappear. But so much had changed since that day in the school auditorium. So much had changed since she made the decision to play her own song instead of the one she was given. The scholarship had been real. Dr. Huang had kept her promise. Within a month of the talent show, May had started lessons at the conservatory with some of the best teachers in the city. She practiced on grand pianos that cost more than her mother made in a year. She learned things about music she never knew existed. Theory, composition, history, technique. Every lesson opened up a new world. But the best part wasn't the lessons or the fancy pianos or the prestigious program. The best part was that people finally saw her. At the conservatory, she wasn't the quiet girl nobody noticed. She was May, the girl with the gift. The girl who taught herself to play on a broken keyboard. The girl who walked onto a stage and made an entire auditorium stand up and cry. Her story spread quickly among the other students and teachers. Some of them treated her like a legend. Others were curious, wanting to know how she did it. A few were jealous. But even they couldn't deny what they heard when she played. For the first time in her life, May had friends. Real friends, who understood her love for music because they felt it too. They stayed up late, talking about their favorite composers. They challenged each other to learn difficult pieces. They celebrated each other's victories and comforted each other after failures. May had spent so many years alone that she almost forgot what it felt like to belong somewhere. But even with all the changes, some things stayed the same. She still lived in the same small apartment with her mother. The elevator still didn't work. The hallway still smelled like cooking. But now, in the corner of May's bedroom, there was something new. A piano. Not the old electric keyboard with the broken keys. A real upright piano, donated by the conservatory for students who didn't have instruments at home. It was old and needed tuning every few months. But to May, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. She played it every night before bed, filling the small apartment with music that drifted through the thin walls and into the neighbors' homes. Nobody complained. In fact, the old woman who lived next door told May's mother that she looked forward to it every evening. She said it helped her sleep. May's mother still worked hard. She still came home tired, but something in her had changed too. There was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. A pride in her eyes when she looked at her daughter. She had spent so many years worrying that she wasn't giving May enough, that the long hours and the small apartment and the second-hand clothes were holding her back. But May had proven that none of that mattered. Talent didn't care about money. Dreams didn't need permission. Now, standing backstage at the concert hall, May thought about how far she had come. 1 year ago, she was invisible. 1 year ago, she was afraid to take up space. 1 year ago, she almost played a nursery rhyme and walked off the stage without anyone knowing what she was capable of. But she had made a different choice, and that choice had changed everything. May Lin, the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, performing an original composition. She stepped out from behind the curtain and walked onto the stage. The concert hall was even more impressive from this view. Hundreds of faces looked up at her from the audience. She spotted her mother in the 5th row, sitting between Dr. Huang and Mr. Bradley. Her mother was already crying, and May hadn't even started playing yet. May smiled. Some things never changed. She walked to the grand piano at the center of the stage. It was massive, and black, and polished so perfectly that she could see her reflection in its surface. She sat down on the bench and adjusted the height, just the way her teachers had taught her. She placed her hands on the keys and felt the familiar smoothness beneath her fingertips. The audience went quiet. The hall fell into perfect silence. The kind of silence that only exists in places built for music. May closed her eyes. She thought about her journey. The years of practicing alone in her bedroom. The nights when she wondered if anyone would ever hear her. The fear she felt before the talent show. The moment she decided to be brave, she thought about her mother. All the sacrifices. All the love. All the quiet support that never asked for anything in return. She thought about the little girl she used to be. The one who sat in the back of every classroom. The one who ate lunch alone. The one who believed she was invisible. That girl was still inside her. She would always be inside her, but she wasn't hiding anymore. May opened her eyes and began to play. The music filled the concert hall like light filling a dark room. It was a new piece, one she had composed over the past 6 months. It told the story of everything she had been through. The loneliness, the hope, the fear, the courage, the love. Her hands moved across the keys with confidence and grace. Every note was intentional. Every phrase was shaped with care. She had learned so much in the past year. But the most important thing she learned was this. Technique was just a tool. The real music came from somewhere deeper. It came from the truth of who you were. The piece built and swelled, rising toward its climax. May poured everything into it. All her gratitude. All her joy. All her pain. She let the music speak the words she could never say out loud. When she played the final note, she held it for a long moment, letting it fade into the silence of the hall. Then she lifted her hands from the keys. The audience erupted. They rose to their feet, all of them, every single person in the hall. The applause thundered against the walls, echoing up to the painted ceiling and back down again. People cheered. People wiped tears from their eyes. People turned to each other with expressions of amazement. May stood up from the piano and faced the crowd. She found her mother's face in the sea of people. Her mother was standing too, clapping harder than anyone, tears streaming down her cheeks. May smiled at her, a real smile, full and bright and unafraid. She had spent so long being invisible, so long believing that someone like her didn't deserve to be seen. But she understood now that being invisible had been a choice. A safe choice. A choice made out of fear. The moment she decided to stop hiding was the moment everything changed. It wasn't the talent that set her free. It wasn't the scholarship or the fancy teachers or the concert hall. It was the decision to be brave. The decision to believe that her voice mattered. The decision to stop waiting for permission and start playing the music that was already inside her. That was the lesson she wanted to pass on. To every quiet kid sitting in the back of the room. To every person who felt like the world had forgotten them. To everyone who had a dream but was too scared to chase it. You are not invisible. You have never been invisible. The world is just waiting for you to show them who you really are. May took a bow as the applause continued to wash over her. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. But for this moment, she let herself feel it. The joy. The gratitude. The peace of finally becoming the person she was always meant to be. She walked off the stage, and the music stayed with her. It always would.